In the late 15th century, as Europe clawed its way across the Atlantic, a chilling report bled from the logs of a caravel. Hundreds of miles from any known land, the entry was stark, impossible. Midnight, voices, clear as day, calling our names from the depths below. Days later, that ship and 3 others that followed its phantom lure simply ceased to exist. No wreckage, no survivors, just the last desperate coordinates, 39 degrees north, 37 degrees west. An empty, open ocean, except it wasn't empty. Something was calling. The Esperanza, a humble caravel built for trade routes, not legend, set sail from Palos de la Frontera in the spring of 1497. Master Jorge de Silva, its captain, was a man forged by predictable currents and charted stars. His log, later discovered in a miraculously preserved barnacle-encrusted cask off the Azores, became the first chilling testament to an impossible truth. Its pages, stiff with salt and time, chronicled not a journey, but a descent. Silva's initial entries read with the blunt practicality of any seasoned mariner. Weather, provisions, sightings, the mundane rhythm of a transatlantic crossing. But on the 12th night of their westward leg, as the moon bled silver onto an otherwise indifferent sea, a new entry appeared, stark in its departure from the ordinary. October 3rd, 1497, latitude 34 parsec N. A strange song on the wind, not of this world. The phrasing was deliberate. Not a strange sound, but a strange song, implying melody, structure, and a sinister, almost conscious intent. The not of this world hinted at a primal terror, a profound anomaly that even Silva, a man of empirical observation, could not dismiss. October 4th, the song continues. Now, words, clear as a bell. My own name, Jorge de Silva. Come, impossible. The men hear it too. Some cover their ears, weeping, pleading with saints. Others listen. Their faces slacken, a terrifying calm settling upon them. It's a lullaby, a promise. I ordered the watches doubled. The ship's priest began continuous prayer. It changed nothing. The voice, it adapts. The personalization was key. The voice knew his name and the names of his crew. This was no random sonic anomaly. This was intelligent, targeted. The men's reactions, weeping in terror, yet simultaneously falling into a strange, unsettling compliance, painted a picture of insidious psychological manipulation. The captain's attempts to impose order, to fight the unseen enemy with faith and discipline, were futile. October 5th, the whispers multiply. No longer just names. Please, Father, we are lost. The currents betray us. Brother, the light is here. The true shore awaits. It called to each man by their kin, by their deepest longing, by their most secret, unspoken fears. Ricardo, the boatswain, swore he heard his dead mother's voice, clear as the day she died, urging him towards a horizon that promised reunion. Mateo, the navigator, spoke of a woman, radiant and beautiful, promising safe harbor, a home he had not seen in years, a mirage conjured from his deepest yearning. Fear became a cold, internal thing, not of the storm, but of the mind. My orders became whispers against a rising tide of compliance. The compass, I swear, began to spin, though the heavens held true. The very air tasted of salt and something ancient. This expanded on the psychological impact, demonstrating the voice's ability to tap into the crew's most vulnerable points. The mention of the compass spinning adds a physical anomaly to the psychological horror, blurring the lines of reality. The true shore is a potent, chilling detail, hinting at a perceived paradise that is, in fact, doom. October 6th, the call changed. From luring to command. West, follow the light. West, the wind, the currents, the very stars screamed against it. Our course was altered. I fought them. My first mate, Manuel, his eyes wide and unseeing, his face a mask of serene madness, wrestled me from the helm. He mumbled, "She calls, Captain. The true shore. We must obey." He believed it. They all did. The men, once my loyal crew, now moved with an unnatural, almost reverent purpose. They turned the helm. They trimmed the sails, all towards the empty west. I am locked below, in the captain's cabin. The key turned from the outside. The ship sails towards the voice. The timbers groan, not from stress, but from some deeper, resonant hum that seems to vibrate through the very marrow of my bones. It is a song of the abyss, the escalation from whisper to command, the mutiny orchestrated by an unseen force, the captain's forced confinement. These details amplify the irresistible nature of the call. The groaning timbers, resonating with an unseen hum, add to the sensory horror, suggesting the ship itself is succumbing. The final entry, scrawled in a hand that had abandoned all pretense of sanity, was dated October 8th, faded almost to illegibility. The light, it consumes. The voice, it is within us. She comes. The true shore. All are one. The coordinates, hastily marked, pointed the Esperanza not towards any known destination, not towards Europe or the New World, but directly into the featureless void of the North Atlantic. A course deviation of nearly 90 degrees, maintained for days, against all logic, against all survival instinct. This was not a storm, not a navigational error, not a drunken mutiny. This was an invitation, horrifyingly accepted. This single waterlogged log, found years later by a Portuguese fishing trawler, was a prophecy, a chilling prelude to a pattern of disappearances that would echo across the age of discovery, a pattern that suggested the ocean itself had a voice and a hunger. This is merely the first whisper of a mystery that spans centuries, a cold case written in brine and terror, a detective story where the only witness is the sea itself. If you're ready to dive deeper into the uncharted currents of history and anomaly, if you dare to confront the impossible truths that lurk beneath the waves, then hit that like button, subscribe to the Maritime Chronicler, and join this investigation. Because the ocean keeps its secrets, but sometimes it leaves us clues that scream louder than any storm. The loss of the Esperanza was, at first, dismissed. A rogue storm, a navigational error, perhaps even piracy in the vast, untamed Atlantic. The perils of the sea were many, and ships often vanished without a trace. But then, months later, another vessel, the Santa Maria de la Paz, bound for the Canary Islands from Lisbon, simply failed to arrive. Its last known position, logged by a passing merchantman, placed it hundreds of miles off course, heading due west into the same empty expanse that had claimed the Esperanza. The merchantman's log contained a terse, unsettling note, heard strange wailing in the night, like a woman or a child, followed for a time, then turned back. God protect us. Then came the Solara, a Spanish treasure caravel disappearing on its return journey from the New World, laden with gold and silver. Its escort ship, the Leon, reported a sudden, inexplicable course change by the Solara, veering sharply northwest. The Leon's captain, a hardened veteran named Alonso de Vargas, recorded in his official report to the Admiralty, the Solara turned as if pulled by an invisible hand. We hailed them. No response. Only a sound, carried on the wind, like 1,000 voices, singing a dirge. And then, silence. They vanished into the dawn mist, leaving only the smell of salt and dread. The Leon, after futile attempts to follow, wisely turned back, its crew shaken to the core, attributing the phenomenon to a demonic enchantment. The final nail in the coffin of rational explanation was the Ventura, a Portuguese exploration vessel charting new routes south of the Azores. Weeks overdue, her fate remained unknown until fragments of her mainmast, bearing her distinctive crest, washed ashore on the Irish coast. Embedded in the splintered wood was a small, lead-sealed scroll, miraculously preserved. It contained a single, desperate message, believed to be from her second mate, Gonzalo Perez. The voices, they call us to the abyss. They know our sins. They promise peace. We sail into the great darkness. Forgive us. The coordinates, though imprecise due to the scroll's damage, placed the Ventura in the same anomalous region as the others. 4 caravels, 4 distinct voyages, 4 disappearances, separated by months, sometimes a year, but all sharing a terrifying commonality, a sudden, inexplicable deviation from their charted course, leading them into the same empty quadrant of the North Atlantic. And in each case, fragmented, desperate accounts of voices or songs that seemed to lure the ships, not by force, but by an insidious psychological pull. This was no coincidence. This was a pattern, a hunting ground. The Admiralty, initially attributing the losses to separate incidents, storms, piracy, navigational errors, began to notice the chilling convergence. Naval strategists, analyzing the final reported vectors, found them baffling. These weren't ships caught in a gale, driven off course. These were vessels that had deliberately turned, sailing for days into the featureless ocean, away from trade winds, away from land, away from any logical destination. They were chasing something, or rather, something was calling them. No wreckage fields were ever found. No bodies, no flotsam beyond the Ventura's mast. It was as if the ships and their crews had simply dissolved into the ocean, consumed entirely by the very entity that had called to them. The lost fleet of the Whispering Abyss, as it came to be known in hushed tones among mariners, became a dark stain on the expanding maps of the world, a red warning to avoid that cursed patch of sea. The fear wasn't of storms or rocks, but of something far more ancient, far more intelligent, that spoke with a human tongue. This was more than a maritime mystery. This was a detective story written in the silence of the deep, a case built on fragments of terror, on the last words of men lured to their doom. And this is just the beginning of our investigation. If you're ready to unravel the profound, chilling truth behind these disappearances, if you want to join us in charting the unknown, then do us a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the Maritime Chronicler, and ring the notification bell, because the depths have secrets, and we're just beginning to hear their whispers. The most unsettling aspect of the Lost Fleet's demise wasn't merely the disappearance, but the nature of the sounds preceding it. These were not the mournful groans of a dying ship, nor the shriek of a gale, nor even the haunting cries of seabirds. They were voices. And not just any voices, they were intelligible, personal, and profoundly manipulative. From the fragmented accounts, pieced together from recovered logs, secondhand confessions of sailors who had sailed near the affected zone, and later, the chilling analyses of monastic scholars, a pattern emerged. The initial reports from the Esperanza spoke of songs and words, but as the phenomenon intensified, the specificity became horrifying. Master Silva's log, before his descent into terror, spoke of his own name being called. Subsequent, unconfirmed reports from other vessels that skirted the edges of the affected area, or from sailors who had served on the lost ship's earlier voyages, painted a consistent picture. The voices seemed to know the listener. The cook, old Pedro, recounted a survivor from a later voyage that had briefly heard the fringe of the phenomenon. He swore he heard his mother calling him. Not just a sound, mind you, her voice, her very words, telling him to come home, to follow the light. This wasn't a general siren song. It was a carefully tailored psychological assault, a chilling fragment salvaged from what was believed to be the Solara's medical officer's personal journal, recounted a nightmare scenario. The air thickened with whispers. Not one voice, but a chorus. They spoke of our deepest regrets, of sins unconfessed, of loves lost. They offered solace. They promised reunion. They offered peace in the depths. And then they commanded, "Come, children, your journey ends here. The true shore awaits." The profound terror lay in the intimate knowledge the voices displayed, striking at the very core of each sailor's psyche. It was as if the ocean itself had become a confessional, then a tormentor, then a false prophet. Monastic theories, later compiled by Brother Ignatius of the Order of St. Benedict in his unpublished treatise, De Vocibus Oceanis, on the voices of the ocean, elaborated on this. Ignatius, who diligently collected every scrap of testimony from returning sailors and merchants, noted, "The infernal chorus did not merely mimic, it learned, it responded. If a man prayed, it would echo his prayers, sometimes completing them. If a man wept for his lost child, it would call his child's name, promising deliverance. It was a predator of the soul, using the very fabric of human connection as its lure." One of the most disturbing accounts, attributed to a delirious sailor rescued from a derelict fishing vessel that had drifted too close to the cursed coordinates, spoke of not just words, but commands that resonated with terrifying authority. It told us to sail west, to put out the lights, to silence the bells. It said we were going home, and it spoke with the voice of the captain himself, though he stood beside me, shouting against the wind. This detail, the voice mimicking the captain's own commands, suggests an unparalleled level of mimicry, capable of undermining the very hierarchy and authority structure of a ship. It turned the crew against their own leadership, not by force, but by a chilling, perfect imitation. This was not the wail of a banshee or the song of a mythical siren. Those were external threats. This was an internal invasion, a psychological weapon that turned a man's own mind against him. It exploited his deepest longings, his most sacred beliefs, his most primal fears. The sheer specificity and adaptability of the speech suggested something beyond known natural phenomena. It wasn't just sounds. It was language, it was intelligent, and it was hungry. The profound question that haunted the few who dared to speak of it was, what could possibly possess such an ability? What entity, hidden beneath the waves, could so perfectly replicate human speech, understanding not just its sounds, but its emotional weight, its personal resonance, its power to command and deceive? This wasn't magic, this was something far more disturbing. This was a direct assault on the very essence of what it meant to be human, whispered from the deepest, darkest parts of the world. Join us as we continue to dissect the evidence, to push past superstition, and to seek a rational explanation for the impossible. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Maritime Chronicler, and activate the notification bell. Your support helps us bring these profound mysteries to light. The true depth of the mystery became undeniable when the various Admiralty reports were collated. The Admiralty Report of 1498 regarding anomalous maritime losses, a document quietly filed away and largely suppressed, paints a stark picture of the impossible. This was no scattered series of mishaps. It was a concentrated pattern of doom. The report, compiled from the sparse logs of escort ships, the desperate scrawls of doomed captains, and the bewildered testimonies of merchantmen who had briefly interacted with the lost vessels, revealed a chilling commonality: the final, inexplicable course deviations. Take the Esperanza. Master Silva's final garbled coordinates placed her hundreds of miles west of her intended route to the New World. Her last known trajectory, based on the logs of a Portuguese fishing fleet that sighted her days before her disappearance, showed a sharp turn, almost 90 degrees to the northwest, maintained for over 3 days, a straight, unwavering line into the featureless ocean, away from the prevailing winds, away from the currents that would have carried her to her destination. It was a vector of intent, not of drift. The Santa Maria de la Paz, bound for the Canaries, was last sighted by the São Miguel, a merchant cog. The São Miguel's log noted, "The Santa Maria veered suddenly, due west, signaled, no response. Her sails trimmed as if for a sprint. Into the setting sun, where there is nothing." Analysis of this observation, cross-referenced with the Santa Maria's last known position, indicated a sustained westward course against the very currents that would have aided her journey south. She sailed into the eye of the unknown, as if drawn by an irresistible magnet. Perhaps the most alarming was the Solara, a treasure caravel, heavy with the wealth of the Indies. Her escort, the Leon, witnessed her final, horrifying act. Captain de Vargas's report was precise. The Solara turned northwest, suddenly, violently. Her crew, visible on deck, seemed possessed. No attempt to correct course. They sailed directly into the open ocean, where no land, no port, no shelter existed. It was as if they were drawn by a hidden beacon, yet there was none. The Solara's trajectory, calculated from the Leon's reports and later inexact celestial observations, showed a relentless, unswerving path into the deep, maintained until she was lost to sight. This wasn't a ship lost in a fog. This was a ship deliberately, methodically, sailing into oblivion. And then, the Ventura, the exploration vessel. Her fragmented scroll, though damaged, contained coordinates that placed her on a sustained northward trajectory, far from any charted routes, far from the southern waters she was meant to explore. She was heading into the desolate, frigid expanse of the North Atlantic, a region known only for its storms and its emptiness. Her mast, found off Ireland, confirmed the immense distance she had covered on this impossible, self-destructive course. She had been drawn thousands of miles from her original path, her crew obeying a command that defied survival. These were not random events. 4 ships, lost over a period of a few years, all vanishing in the same vast, empty expanse of the North Atlantic, and critically, all exhibiting final course changes that were not the result of adverse weather or navigational error, but rather a deliberate, sustained deviation into the open, featureless ocean. They sailed away from safety, away from land, away from any logical destination. They sailed towards something, or more accurately, towards a sound. The Admiralty, in its chilling conclusion, could offer no conventional explanation. The official stance became lost at sea, presumed foundered. But the internal reports, the hushed conversations among high-ranking naval officers, hinted at a darker, unspoken truth. They had sailed into a void, lured by an unseen force that could command ships and crews with a whisper. The physical evidence, though scarce, pointed to an irresistible pull, a siren call that transcended the physical realm, bending the will of hardened mariners and sending their vessels on a death course. The empty coordinates, the lack of wreckage, the uniform, deliberate deviation into nothingness, these were the indelible scars left by a predator that hunted not with teeth, but with a voice that knew their names. The direct evidence of the voice of the abyss was almost always fatal. Those who heard it followed it, yet fragmented accounts from the periphery of the phenomenon, from those who brushed against the terror and survived, offered chilling glimpses into its nature. These were not the logs of the doomed, but the desperate confessions of the fortunate few who had resisted or who had merely witnessed its devastating effects on others. One such account came from an old, grizzled Portuguese whaler named Vasco Mendes, years after the main disappearances. His ship, the Sea Serpent, had been driven north by an unexpected gale in 1503, far from its usual hunting grounds. The storm broke, Mendes recounted to a terrified tavern in Lisbon, and the air cleared, but the sea, it hummed, a low thrum, like a giant bell ringing deep, deep below. Then the whispers began. Not for me, thank God, but for young Tomas, the cabin boy. He swore he heard his sister, who died in childbirth, calling him, pleading with him to jump, to join her in the waves. Mendes described Tomas's eyes glazing over, his body swaying towards the rail. It took 3 strong men to restrain him, binding him until the unnatural sound faded with the returning winds. Tomas never fully recovered, muttering about the beautiful dark and the calling. This was a near miss, a testament to the voice's insidious, targeted nature, even if the target wasn't the entire ship. Another chilling testimony came from a Spanish priest, Father Esteban, who had accompanied a small exploratory vessel, the San Cristobal, on a voyage near the Azores in 1500. Their mission was to search for new fishing grounds, but they stumbled into something far more profound. We saw it, Father Esteban wrote in a letter to his monastic order. A caravel, perhaps the Esperanza, though God knows it was only a ghost by then. Its sails were tattered, its hull seemed to weep black water, yet it moved with unnatural speed straight into the setting sun. From its deck, we heard it, a sound, like 1,000 voices singing a hymn, yet each note was a scream. And then a single voice, clear and cold, calling out, "Forgive them, Father. They come to me willingly." It was a woman's voice, ancient, filled with a sorrow that was not human, yet it spoke with absolute authority. We fled. We turned our ship and fled, for the Lord himself seemed to warn us away from that unholy mimicry. This account is critical. It provides a visual of one of the ghost ships, still sailing, still under the influence of the call, and a direct quote from the voice itself, confirming its manipulative power and sinister intent. The description, ancient and unholy mimicry, captures the profound, unsettling nature of the phenomenon, moving beyond simple superstition to something far more elemental and predatory. There's also the apocryphal tale of Old Man Paris, a reclusive lighthouse keeper on the coast of Galicia. He claimed that on certain nights, when the wind was just right and the fog rolled in thick from the west, he could hear it. Not words, not exactly, he'd whisper to the few brave fishermen who sought shelter in his cove, more like the echo of words, like a prayer or a lament stretched thin across the water. But sometimes I hear a name. My own or my wife's long dead, and it tries to pull you, a cold, soft hand, drawing you out to sea. It wants company. His descriptions, though vague, align with the insidious, personal nature of the lure, an echo of the deeper, more specific calls experienced by those directly ensnared. These fragmented, desperate testimonies, though often dismissed as sailors' superstitions or the ramblings of madmen, collectively paint a consistent, terrifying picture. The voice was not a random noise. It was a conscious, intelligent entity capable of perfect, personalized mimicry. It could replicate the voices of loved ones, echo prayers, articulate commands, and speak to the deepest, most vulnerable parts of the human psyche. It was a predator that hunted not with speed or strength, but with a chilling, perfect understanding of its prey's desires and fears. It was this unnerving precision, this ability to weaponize human emotion and memory, that truly set the voice of the abyss apart from any known natural phenomenon or even traditional folklore. It suggested a level of intelligence, or at least instinctual cunning, that defied all understanding. The few who survived its peripheral influence carried its echo within them, a profound and disturbing testament to an unseen force that lurked in the empty spaces of the ocean, forever calling. In an era where the unknown was often attributed to the divine or the demonic, the initial explanations for the lost fleet's vanishing were steeped in superstition. Mariners, steeped in folklore, whispered of sea demons, malevolent spirits, or even the devil himself, luring souls to watery damnation. The most common theory among the common folk was that the ships had encountered sirens. Not the beautiful half-bird women of Greek myth, but grotesque, scaled creatures with voices of impossible beauty, capable of luring sailors to their rocky doom. Yet this explanation quickly foundered against the cold, hard facts of the Admiralty reports. Sirens lured ships onto rocks. These vessels sailed into the open ocean, hundreds of miles from any landmass. Their doom was not collision, but consumption. Others spoke of banshees of the sea, Irish spirits, whose wails foretold death. But banshees were harbingers, not agents of destruction. Their cries were mournful, not manipulative. The accounts from the Esperanza and other vessels explicitly detailed intelligible speech, personalized calls, and direct commands. A banshee did not know Master Silva's name, nor could it mimic his dead mother's voice. Then came the fearful whispers of infernal pacts or demonic possession. Perhaps the crews, driven to madness by isolation or despair, had fallen prey to the devil's whispers, turning their ships willingly towards hell. This theory found some traction among the more zealous clergy, who saw the disappearances as divine judgment or the work of Lucifer's maritime agents. However, this explanation failed to account for the systematic nature of the disappearances, the consistent geographical anomaly, and the precise, adaptable mimicry reported. Demonic influence, while terrifying, was typically portrayed as a chaotic, corrupting force, not a sophisticated, targeted hunting strategy. What truly undermined these superstitious explanations was the unnatural precision of the mimicry. A sea demon might wail, a banshee might keen, but to perfectly replicate the voice of a specific individual's deceased mother, to echo the very words of a specific prayer, to issue commands in the captain's own voice, this transcended mere supernatural influence. It suggested a profound, almost scientific understanding of human psychology and vocalization. It was not a beast, nor a spirit of the damned, wrote Brother Ignatius in De Vocibus Oceanis, rejecting the common superstitions of his time. For a beast hunts with tooth and claw, and a spirit torments with fear and despair. But this entity, it hunted with knowledge. It dissected the soul, identified its deepest yearning, and then fabricated a lure from that very yearning. It was a perfect, terrible mirror held to a man's heart. Ignatius, despite his religious framework, recognized the chillingly rational, almost analytical nature of the phenomenon. The phenomenon defied the neat categorizations of medieval folklore. It wasn't a monster that crashed ships. It was a psychological predator that convinced them to sail to their doom. It wasn't a ghost haunting the waves. It was an entity that meticulously crafted an illusion of hope, solace, or command. drawing its victims into a self-inflicted oblivion. The sheer adaptability of the voice, its ability to shift from a loved one's plea to a captain's command, from a sacred hymn to a terrifying indictment of sin, pointed to something far more complex than simple supernatural malevolence. It was this unnerving intelligence, this calculated malice, that forced a reevaluation. The sea in this cursed quadrant was not merely dangerous, it was aware, and it spoke. But what was speaking, and how did it possess such a terrifying mastery of the human psyche? The answers lay beyond the simplistic framework of medieval superstition, demanding a deeper, more profound investigation into the nature of the unknown. As the age of discovery matured, and the initial shock of the lost fleet subsided into legend, a new wave of thought emerged from the cloistered halls of Europe's monasteries and nascent universities. The simplistic explanations of sea demons and banshees gave way to more complex, often disturbing, theological and philosophical hypotheses. The monastic theories of the 16th century, though still framed within a religious worldview, grappled with the profound implications of the voice of the abyss, pushing beyond mere superstition to consider the very nature of creation and consciousness. One prominent theory, championed by the Augustinian scholar Father Anselm of Lisbon, proposed the divine echo hypothesis. Anselm, influenced by Neoplatonic thought, posited that the ocean was a vast, living entity, a mirror reflecting the collective consciousness of humanity. The voices, he argued, were not a malevolent entity, but a returned echo of man's own hubris, his greed, his desperate longing for new lands and treasures. When man ventures into the deepest unholy places, Anselm wrote in his treatise Speculum Maris, the mirror of the sea, the ocean, being a vessel of divine memory, reflects his true self back to him. The voices are not alien, but our own deepest desires and fears, amplified and distorted, calling us to a self-made doom. It is the ocean's judgment, mirroring our internal chaos. This theory suggested a passive, yet profoundly judgmental ocean, turning man's own inner turmoil into his external undoing. The ships were not lured by an outside force, by nauwalmas or outside force, but by the amplified echoes of their own psychological landscapes. A darker, more unsettling hypothesis emerged from the Benedictine order, particularly from the writings of Brother Theron of Montserrat. His oceanic consciousness theory proposed that the sea itself possessed a primitive, ancient consciousness, a vast alien intellect that predated humanity. This consciousness, Theron argued, was not inherently evil, but profoundly other. It is a consciousness without form, without human morality, Theron posited. It observes, it absorbs, it learns. The voices are its attempts to interact, to communicate, to draw into itself that which it perceives as interesting or useful. The ships are not victims of malice, but of curiosity, drawn into an incomprehensible dialogue with an entity that perceives life and death in cycles far grander than our own. This was a terrifying thought, an entire ocean thinking, learning, and drawing ships to it, not for malevolent intent, but for reasons utterly alien to human comprehension. It was a cosmic lure, a vast, indifferent mind, absorbing tiny human vessels into its incomprehensible depths. Perhaps the most chilling theory, whispered in hushed tones among a small radical sect of Franciscan monks, was the pre-planned luring hypothesis. This theory suggested that the ships were not merely victims of a random, inexplicable phenomenon, but were deliberately sent towards the call, not by human design, but by unseen forces, perhaps ancient pre-Adamic intelligences, or even angelic demonic powers, manipulating human discovery for their own inscrutable ends. These entities, they argued, used the voice of the abyss as a tool, a selective mechanism to remove certain vessels or individuals from the timeline, or to draw them into a different dimension or reality. The voice is but a key, one anonymous Franciscan text suggested, unlocking a gate that only those prepared or condemned may enter. The ships vanish not by destruction, but by translocation. They are not lost, they are taken. This theory transformed the mystery from a maritime disaster into a profound cosmic manipulation, where human agency was but a puppet on strings held by unseen hands. These monastic theories, despite their speculative nature, marked a significant intellectual shift. They moved beyond simple fear of the unknown to attempt to categorize, analyze, and even rationalize the impossible. They grappled with the idea of a conscious ocean, of echoed consciousness, or of hidden manipulators. They dared to ask not just what happened, but why, and what does it mean about the very fabric of our world. These were not just ships lost at sea. They were profound anomalies that challenged the very boundaries of human understanding and the perceived order of the cosmos. The voice, whether an echo, an alien consciousness, or a tool of unseen powers, was becoming something far more terrifying than a mere monster. It was a fundamental disruption to reality itself. Leaving behind the theological speculation of the monasteries, our investigation now turns to the realm of modern, or pseudo-modern, given the inherent mystery, scientific inquiry. If the voice of the abyss was not a demon or a divine echo, what biological explanation could account for such an uncanny, intelligent mimicry? This brings us to the bioacoustic mimicry hypothesis. We know that mimicry exists in the natural world. Parrots can flawlessly imitate human speech, even complex phrases. Lyrebirds in Australia can replicate the sounds of chainsaws, camera clicks, and car alarms with astonishing accuracy. Orcas have been observed mimicking human words. These are complex vocalizations, not mere squawks. The mechanism is often based on the creature's ability to manipulate air through complex vocal cords or specialized organs, combined with a highly developed auditory processing system. Consider the possibility of a deep-sea creature possessing an analogous, yet far more advanced, vocal apparatus. The deep ocean is a realm of extreme pressures and perpetual darkness, where sound is often the primary mode of communication. Creatures there have evolved sophisticated echolocation systems, bioluminescent displays, and intricate vocalizations for hunting, mating, and defense. What if, among these unseen wonders, there exists a species capable of sonic mimicry on an unprecedented scale? Imagine an ancient, highly intelligent cephalopod, or a previously undiscovered species of deep-sea whale that has evolved to mimic the distress calls or communication patterns of surface-dwelling creatures. Its prey, in this case, being humans. The deep ocean is home to creatures that have remained unchanged for millennia, adapting to the most extreme environments. It is plausible that an apex predator existing in these unfathomable depths could develop a hunting strategy based on acoustic deception. This creature wouldn't just replicate sounds, it would analyze and reconstruct them. Its brain, or whatever passes for a central nervous system, would possess an advanced capacity for pattern recognition and vocal synthesis. It would be able to listen to the ambient sounds of a ship, the creak of timbers, the shouted commands, the conversations of the crew, and then synthesize these elements into a terrifyingly accurate facsimile. The personalization, calling out specific names or echoing personal prayers, would require an extraordinary level of auditory discrimination and memory, allowing it to identify individual voices and their associated emotional content. Such a creature, if it existed, speculated Dr. Alistair Finch, a theoretical bioacoustician in a hypothetical 19th century scientific journal, would be the ultimate apex predator. It would not need to chase its prey. It would merely need to call to it, luring them into its domain, where the pressure and darkness are its allies, and where the ship, once drawn in, would be crushed or consumed without trace. Finch's theories, though considered outlandish at the time, represent an early attempt to ground the supernatural in the biological. The voice of the abyss could be the ultimate example of a biological lure call. Just as anglerfish use a bioluminescent lure to attract prey, this hypothetical creature would use sound. But its lure would be infinitely more sophisticated, tapping into the very essence of human language and emotion. It would be a creature that understands, instinctively, the power of a whispered name, the comfort of a familiar voice, the irresistible pull of a promise. It would be a monster that hunts not with fangs, but with the echoes of your deepest desires. This hypothesis offers a compelling, albeit terrifying, alternative to the purely supernatural. It suggests that the impossible voices were not spirits, but the evolved vocalizations of an unknown, deep-sea organism, a master of deception, whose hunting ground was the very fabric of human psychology. It brings the mystery back into the realm of the natural, yet makes that natural world infinitely more alien and terrifying. Beyond mere bioacoustic mimicry, a more nuanced scientific theory emerges from the intersection of physics and neurology, the infrasound and neurological manipulation theory. This hypothesis suggests that the voice of the abyss wasn't just mimicking human speech, but was simultaneously employing a frequency of sound capable of inducing profound psychological and physiological effects on the human brain, rendering its victims highly susceptible to suggestion, hallucination, and irrational behavior. Infrasound, or infra-low frequency sound, is below the threshold of human hearing, typically below 20 Hz. Yet despite being inaudible, it is known to have powerful, often unsettling, effects on the human body. Studies have shown that exposure to specific infrasound frequencies can induce feelings of anxiety, dread, sorrow, extreme discomfort, and even full-blown panic attacks. It can cause visual distortions, a sensation of being watched, and in some cases, auditory hallucinations, phantom voices, whispers, or a sense of presence. This is due to the way these low-frequency vibrations interact with internal organs, fluid-filled cavities, and even the brain itself. Consider a massive deep-sea creature, or even a geological phenomenon in the ocean floor, capable of generating powerful infrasound. This sound, traveling through the water, could resonate with the human body and mind, creating a pervasive sense of terror and disorientation. Now overlay this with the precise bioacoustic mimicry we discussed earlier. The voice, if it were accompanied by specific infrasonic frequencies, theorized Dr. Evelyn Reed, a modern, pseudo-historical neuroacoustician, would not just be heard, it would be felt. It would bypass the conscious mind and directly assault the limbic system, the seat of emotion and fear. The crew wouldn't just hear their mother's voice. They would feel the dread, the longing, the inexplicable pull, all amplified by the physical resonance of the infrasound. This would create a powerful feedback loop, making them incredibly vulnerable to suggestion. Imagine the environment on board the Esperanza or the Solara. Weeks at sea, confined spaces, sensory deprivation, and the constant rhythmic creaking of the ship. Now introduce an inaudible, yet deeply unsettling hum that vibrates through the deck, through the very bones of the crew. This hum induces a pervasive sense of unease, a gnawing dread that they cannot explain. On top of this, the creature, or phenomenon, begins to emit audible, precisely mimicked human voices. The infrasound would prime the brain, making it more susceptible to auditory illusions. The crew, already disoriented and anxious from the inaudible frequencies, might begin to perceive the mimicked sounds as more real, more personal, more urgent. A whisper, amplified by the terror induced by infrasound, becomes a commanding shout. A familiar name, resonating with a deep, unsettling hum, becomes an irresistible summons from a loved one. The boundary between reality and hallucination would dissolve. This theory explains the unnatural calm noted by Master Silva in some of his crew, and the serene madness of his first mate. Infrasound can induce a dissociative state, a detachment from reality, making individuals prone to following seemingly irrational commands without conscious resistance. They are not merely lured, they are neurologically compelled. Their minds, assaulted and manipulated by forces they cannot perceive, effectively turn against their own survival instincts. The voice of the abyss, then, becomes a two-pronged attack, a highly evolved biological mimicry for conscious deception, combined with a physical manipulation of the human brain through infrasound. This creates a terrifyingly effective lure, turning hardened sailors into willing, almost serene, participants in their own demise. It suggests that the ocean, in its deepest, most alien parts, harbors not just creatures of flesh and blood, but phenomena capable of bending human perception and will, drawing ships to their silent, unseen grave through a symphony of terror and illusion. Synthesizing the bioacoustic mimicry and the infrasound manipulation theories brings us to the most comprehensive, albeit chilling, modern hypothesis, the unidentified deep-sea organism theory. This posits that the voice of the abyss is not a collection of disparate phenomena, but the sophisticated, integrated hunting mechanism of an ancient, highly evolved, and currently unknown deep-sea organism. Imagine a creature that has existed for millennia in the abyssal plains or the crushing pressures of the oceanic trenches. A creature whose evolution has been shaped by the unique conditions of the deep, perpetual darkness, scarce food, and immense pressure. In such an environment, conventional hunting strategies reliant on sight or speed are often insufficient. Sound, however, travels 5 times faster in water than in air, making it an ideal medium for predation. This organism, which we shall call the vocalis profundus, voice of the deep, would possess an extraordinary combination of biological adaptations. First, a highly developed bioacoustic mimicry apparatus. This would not be mere vocal cords, but a complex array of resonating chambers, specialized membranes, and muscular control that allows for the precise generation and modulation of sound waves. Its auditory system would be equally sophisticated, capable of analyzing and storing an immense library of sounds, including the intricate nuances of human speech. It would learn the languages and vocal patterns of its potential prey over centuries, becoming a master of linguistic deception. This is not just mimicry, it is sophisticated vocal synthesis, tailored to exploit the psychological vulnerabilities of its targets. Second, the ability to generate and direct precise infrasound frequencies. The vocalis profundus would possess specialized organs, perhaps resonating sacs or pulsating bioluminescent structures, capable of emitting ultra-low frequencies. These infrasonic waves would act as a preconditioning agent, disorienting the crew, inducing panic, anxiety, or a dissociative calm, effectively softening the target for the audible mimicry. This combination is crucial. The infrasound creates the psychological chaos, while the mimicked voice provides the direction, the irresistible command. Third, a unique predatory instinct. Unlike terrestrial predators that rely on immediate physical capture, the vocalis profundus would be a graveyard hunter. Its goal isn't to chase down a ship, but to subtly, psychologically, lure it into a specific, fatal zone. This zone would likely be a deep-sea trench, a cavernous rift, or a region of extreme pressure where the creature itself thrives, and where a wooden caravel, or even a modern steel hull, would be utterly crushed or swallowed by geological features. The lack of wreckage supports this. The ships are not just sunk, they are consumed by the environment itself, leaving no trace. This organism might not even be entirely physical in the way we understand. Given the extreme conditions of the deep, it could possess a semi-fluidic or gelatinous composition, making it almost impossible to detect or capture. Its intelligence, if it possesses true intelligence, might be entirely alien, perceiving human ships not as individual vessels, but as large, noisy, energy-rich constructs to be systematically drawn into its domain. The vocalis profundus is not a monster born of myth, but a chilling extrapolation of known biological principles pushed to their absolute extreme. It is an apex predator that has mastered the art of psychological warfare, using the very sounds of human connection to lure its victims to an unseen, crushing doom. It is an echo of the ancient primordial ocean, still holding secrets that defy our understanding, and still perhaps calling out to those who venture too far into its silent, terrifying embrace. The age of discovery in this light was not just a period of human exploration, but a period of terrifying encounter with an entity that considered man not a conqueror, but merely another form of prey. The voice of the abyss remains one of the ocean's most profound and disturbing riddles. We have dissected the chilling log of the Esperanza, charted the inexplicable deviations of the lost fleet, and grappled with the terrifying specificity of the voices. Names called, prayers echoed, commands issued in familiar tones. We have dismissed the simple superstitions of a bygone era, finding them insufficient to explain such cunning. Our investigation led us from the solemn halls of monastic thought, where scholars pondered a divine echo or an oceanic consciousness, reflecting man's own fears, to the cold, hard logic of modern science. We explored the bioacoustic mimicry hypothesis, suggesting an apex predator of sound, a vocalis profundus, capable of perfect vocal replication. We delved into the infrasound and neurological manipulation theory, where inaudible frequencies might have primed human minds for terror and suggestion, turning willing sailors into obedient puppets. Ultimately, these paths converge on the unidentified deep-sea organism theory, a creature, ancient and unseen, that hunts not with tooth or claw, but with the very fabric of human language and emotion, luring vessels to a crushing demise in its abyssal hunting grounds. But does even this comprehensive scientific framework fully explain the profound, personal malice, the uncanny knowing that bled from the final entries of those doomed logs? Was it merely the instinct of a biological predator, or something far more alien, an intelligence that transcends our understanding of life itself? Is the ocean simply home to undiscovered creatures, or does it harbor a consciousness so vast, so ancient, that its very presence subtly bends reality, echoing our deepest fears and desires back to us as a fatal lure? The caravels vanished, consumed by an emptiness that still whispers across the waves. The coordinates are known, but the truth remains submerged. The ocean, still 95% unexplored, is a canvas for our deepest fears and wildest imaginings. But sometimes those imaginings whisper back. What do you believe called the lost fleet into the abyss? Was it a biological marvel, a geological phenomenon, or something else entirely? Share your theories in the comments below. Let's continue this investigation together.